Hi everyone and welcome back to part 2 of Western Roundup. I'd like to first thank everybody that's watched the first 3 videos. I could not be happier with the reception that they've gotten so far, and it really does make me motivated to produce new content and just see that content grow. So thank you for that. And I'd also like to ask if you could leave a comment below on what you think of the part 2 formula. By the end of this episode, hopefully you'll know whether or not you like the format or not. I'll try to keep episodes between 20 and 25 minute length, so if a park is going to be taking about 40 minutes, I'm going to probably split it in 2 for now. If that does not work, I can always change. I'm open for suggestions, but for now, I think that's how it's going to go. And I'll probably stop blabbering for now because I'm almost halfway done building this first ride, which is our 3rd junior coaster. It's pretty exciting because it's the first one that actually worked on the first try. Although it did take a while for me to get this double helix, and I think I actually went for a third helix at first, and it failed spectacularly, so I kind of stuck with the double helix here at the end before wrapping back around and doing the back part of the out and back. It worked, and I cannot be happier with the fact that we got our first working junior coaster on the first try, so we'll take that. And it seems like junior coasters might be becoming a normalized part in just the park building process going forward. Although I really don't want that to be the case because there are not the most exciting coasters to be building. It seems like every park that I've seen so far has a junior coaster as one of the starting coaster types, and I guess that's okay. The one thing I would like to figure out though is how to get the excitement and the intensity ratings up on these rides, because from what I can tell, unless you just pump airtime hills into the rides, it's really hard to get an excitement or an intensity rating over 50. Well, I kind of take that back because it's probably easier to get an intensity rating over 50 than an excitement rating, because you can make the G-forces unbelievably tough to the point where people just die on the rides. I talked briefly last episode about people making death parks, and that would definitely be one of the ways that you could do so. And that's not necessarily the direction that I'm trying to go with these parks. So, yeah, intensity and excitement ratings, I need to figure out what the formula is, whether it's just more airtime hills, more helixes, more inversions. Well, obviously, junior coasters cannot have inversions, at least that I know of. So, yeah, that's a formula I'm going to need to have, or figure out, rather. But now that we're done building the coaster, we get to be doing the more fun part, which is building the station. Up until this episode, I hadn't built a single real coaster station. I kind of mentioned in the previous one that I don't really consider the hangar a station because it was more so just a building built up around the outside, which I know that is what a coaster station is. It's a building around the outside. But it wasn't like a true outdoor coaster. It was more of like a dark ride indoor sort of thing with brief elements of outdoor. So although it was definitely tough trying to come up with 3 unique different coaster stations, I think I handled the challenge pretty well, and I'm really excited to show them off. This first one in this episode, at least, I really wanted to base it off of like a Western train station sort of theme. Most of my buildings have had like just generic like triangular peak roofs, and although this isn't quite that different, there's definitely elevation differences between the different levels of the station. The first one being the platform that everybody's standing on, and then the middle section being a little bit higher with a little bit of gaps for air to flow through. I'm not sure if it was real life, whether there'd actually be windows there or not. I'm more seeing it as like an open concept station, but it definitely has a lot of Western inspired elements. The first station that we built was more so a station that could fit in any generic park. It just so happened to be built of wooden elements as well, whereas this one is specifically tailored to this Western Roundup theme. It does have many of the same parts that the other one does, like the beams. Actually, every single building that I built in this episode is basically the same wooden panels, wooden detailing and support structures, and just different colors. But I do hold true to my kind of design rule that I've came up with, and I don't think it's a design rule that I came up with. That was a bad way of putting it, but it's a really good design rule to follow when you're trying to come up with creativity or creative buildings. And that's that when it comes to color, there should really be approximately 2 or 3 colors in your building design, right? The first one's going to be your roof color. The second one is going to be your main building color, so the walls. And the third one's going to be your detailing. Now, that formula can switch around slightly, but that's generically the standard formula. This one, I do break that rule slightly, and I add a little bit of stone underneath on the back side to kind of have that look when you're going by it, that the supports aren't just wooden beams and that there is actually foundation to the building. Although on the front side, it's only wood, so I'm not entirely sure if that would make sense in real life. But I do like the look that it came along with, and I really enjoy the open air design too, which is I think why I added it along the fences on the back side, so that although in Parkitect no one could get over there, in real life there'd probably be a ride operator standing over there most of the time. The only other thing that really makes it a train station though is the fact that I add a clock here in a little bit. Originally I was thinking of just using the default clock, but I decided that it looked way too metallic-y, and I wanted to make it look more rustic and fit in with the general color scheme. There's the color scheme again. So I made it the same color as the lighter shade of walls that you're seeing here. And I think that it made it fit in better, and it felt more like a cohesive unit. Oh, and I also forgot that in order to do the clock tower, I made the middle section raised a little bit more. So I think it generally feels like a train station. It's obviously a little bit of a mix of like a mining, building with a train station. It feels like something you'd see in like Call of Duty or something. But I like the overall look of it, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. The one thing I might actually go back and change though is add slight bit more detail by adding some horizontal beams across the transition between like the first floor roof and then the second story lighter tan wooden facade. But other than that, I think it turned out pretty okay. Now I think we're going to get started on the last 2 buildings on the main street. Now these took slight inspiration from some of the restaurants that I've seen on many of Ohio's like smaller towns, but also from a lot of the generic Main Street-ish buildings that you see on like the western towns of theme parks. Now I've mentioned this before, but since I live in Ohio, I'm fairly lucky in the fact that we had 3 and now 2 major theme parks, some of the best in the world. And I say 3-ish because Geauga Lake used to exist in Ohio, and now obviously it does not. But that's a slight spoiler for those who are going to watch next week's episode, because next week may be based around Geauga Lake. I can't say for certain, but maybe that gives you a little bit of a taste and gives you some reason to stick around for next week. So if you want to see a Geauga Lake-ish map, that may be coming down the line. But getting back on track, a lot of like my inspiration for things came from Frontier Town at Cedar Point. It's one of the coolest sections of the park, or at least it's probably one of the most themed sections of the park. It's a mixture between that and then more towards the front of the park on like the beach side of things, which isn't really in itself a theme because it's a beach. It's the whole thing is a peninsula, so you can't really theme it when it already is it. I guess I'm not quite sure if that really makes sense or not. But so I would consider the most themed part of Cedar Point to be Frontier Town, and as such, mainly because it has Maverick, it's one of my favorite places to be. But it also has some cool water rides, and oh gosh, I think Max Air is the one with the circle that goes up, and it's like a gigantic swing where everybody spins around on it. I think it's Max Air. Gosh, I can't remember off the top of my head, but people love that ride. I'm still deathly afraid of anything with heights. And even though I love swings and like the swing rides, like my favorite thing, that's like low to the ground, and Max Air is definitely not. So I'll stay away from that. Actually, no, Max Air is the circular one, and then there's a separate one that's a swing, and I forget what that's called. If that's like Hammerhead, I'll have to look it up. But 2 really cool rides in a really cool section of the park, and it definitely helped with the theming that I did with the last couple of buildings on the main street. Although the building that we're building now has no purposes used, it's just a little bit of filler, and I wanted to hide the queue path away. like I still wanted you to be able to see it from the pavilion that we're going to put in like right in front of the station, which kind of ties into the lines of what I was saying on the previous episode, which is that I wanted the stations to be viewable and people to be able to sit down and watch the cars come in, which might also be because since I don't ride all the rides in parks, I spend a lot of time waiting while other people are on rides at parks. You know, sometimes I'll go ride some of the flat rides or find a coaster that I actually do want to ride. But there's a lot of times where I'm perfectly okay just sitting at like a pavilion like this and watching the stations and trying to find the people that I know that are going to go on the rides, you know, take pictures of them and just enjoy the engineering and the architecture behind things. That might be slightly nerdy, but I do like that. And I think that there's other people like me. You know, I can't imagine that I'm the only person that'll sit there and watch the trains go by. So I like to include those little things inside the park. And now I believe we are on to the toughest stretch of building for me. And that is purely because I backed myself into a hole. I took out 2 loans at the start of the park, thinking that would be fine. I could take out more loans if I really needed it to. And the whole thing that I needed to do was just get 500 guests at the same time, concurrent, in the park. That's all I had to do. So I could take out as many loans as I wanted. But when we ran into a problem when I couldn't take any more loans out, and we were negative in terms of cash flow per month. So I had to figure out how I could cut costs at first. And then once I cut costs and started making cash flow, how I could save up incrementally to build rides. Because the only way to get those guests in the park is to make rides. And surprisingly enough, thrill rides seem to be the best way to do so. So that's why I stick 2 of them in here. And I add some ride queues to them as well. The first one is very similar-ish to the train station. I would consider it more of like a Western, like, open-air church kind of theme. I mean, it's definitely not a church, but that's the kind of architecture that I was going behind here. Whereas on this one, which is sort of like Max Air, same concept except for it's circular instead of you're sitting in, cross-section rows. But I think there I'm actually looking for some bandits, because bandits are the death of your theme park. They will break everything and make people mad about the scenery, which will turn people away, and you will lose profit like nobody's business. So, okay, this is definitely not like Max Air because it goes all the way around. Wow, I did not realize that until just watching it. But cool ride nonetheless. And getting back to the more on topic thing, which is that this ride queue, I wanted to make it more of like a modern and realistic, whereas the other one was more of like a fantasy in terms of the fact that I don't think a station like that would be built in like a big modern day commercial park. This station is definitely something that I feel like, or ride queue, it's not a station. It's something that I think you could see at a realistic point in time at like a southern park or a mountainous park, or even western portions of parks could have something similar to this. And that goal, I think, actually, that just popped on the screen for a split second was when I hit the 800 guest total selling, or 800 tickets in total being sold for the park. So that was a pretty big milestone, and I wish that when I hit that one, I could have just finished out all the missions, because it took an incredibly long time to actually hit that final milestone, getting 500 guests in the park. But I will scrap that thought for a second, because now, and I can't believe it only took me 3 episodes to build it, but I built my knockoff Maverick. And I say that, but it's not really anything like Maverick in the sense that all of the elements are completely different, and Maverick's layout is significantly better than the layout that I put here. But originally, I was trying to do one of the monorail coasters that Rocky Mountain Construction, otherwise known as RMC, put out, because I had spent all this extra money and cash on research that I didn't realize, and I wanted to put that coaster in the park. But I could not find a good enough layout for it, and I didn't really like how it was going, so I went back and decided that just having a standard steel coaster would be the way to go. The one thing I did want to include was elements with the path. So far, I've had different rides that have interactions with each other, but no real path interactions. And although I forgot to put the little terraces and pavilions that go underneath or on top of the path in between the track, I do love how not only did I get that interaction with the path, but the other thing I forgot to mention was the splashdown. It comes straight out of the loop directly into a splashdown. It doesn't quite touch down into the water, but it gives you that close enough feel. And since there's that fence that matches right up on the pathway there, you'll actually see throughout the course of this episode in this time lapse that people would come and stop and just watch the train go through the loop-de-loop and through the splashdown element and into the corkscrew. I thought that was really, really cool, and I think that's something that in real life, although right now I don't actually have the finished park that you can see, it's something that people would definitely stop, sit at a bench, or stand there at the edge of the water and just watch happen. Especially if you're one of the people like me that wouldn't go on every single coaster. Now, I will say that if this coaster was in real life, I would go on it, and that's purely because it is not a very tall coaster. It is launched, and launch coasters are actually pretty cool. I enjoy going fast, and so the launch aspect of Maverick is one of the things that really appeals to me. But for some people, it may not be their cup of tea, and that little spot there, like I've mentioned before, is something that I like to include because it just makes that little extra element of realism and just keeps you engulfed in the park, really. Now, another fun story, which I guess I'll bring up now, since we're building a Maverick-ish or Maverick knockoff coaster, is how I actually came to like Maverick so much. Since I've talked about it in the past 3 episodes, I figured I might as well, discuss where my, not infatuation, but essentially love for the ride has come. And that's that on my senior year of high school, the cool thing that you get to do for participating in physics, which is just a not very fun class to begin with, even though I'm an engineer, I should say physics is an amazing class and everybody should take it. It's not a very fun class. There's definitely good concepts that you learn from it, and there's some experiments that are fun, but the main reason why you take physics in high school is so that you can go to Cedar Point, or at least in the Columbus area, that's what the high schools around us tended to do. And because of that, we took physics. We went to Cedar Point, and the first thing that we did was we sprinted. So Cedar Point, they line you up in the beginning of the park right before it opens, and they play this, I want to take you to Cedar Point. They get you in the mood to just be there, and you get all hyped up, and you're right behind the gate, and then all of a sudden the security guards let the gates open. So you actually get to go, not quite halfway in the park, but you get to actually make it your way onto the main street, which they won't let you go on any rides, except for the people that have the early park pass. But other than that, they'll let you up to that point, and then they'll let the gates open and you'll run. And so we sprinted all the way. I think we went to Top Thrill Dragster first, but the next thing we went to was Maverick. And since I held everybody's bags while they were on Top Thrill Dragster, I was with the football players and some people that were way stronger than me. But they would not let me skip out on riding Maverick. They said since I skipped on the last one that I had to ride Maverick. And they got in a little circle around me and arms locked and walked me up the queue line and made sure that they buckled me into the ride so that I had to ride it. And I was more scared than I've ever been in my entire life for no reason, because it was an incredibly fun ride. But now it's the ride that I look forward to, and I tried to run from the opening of the park, from that barricade that they stop you, all the way to Maverick every single time, even though it's at the very back of the park and it takes forever and I'm always exhausted after running. That's the start of my experience at Cedar Point every time I go. And maybe that'll cue you in on a little bit of why I like the ride so much. It's like Stockholm Syndrome. If you get stuck on it so much, eventually you will like it. So maybe that's just what I need to do with the bigger rides like Millennium Force and Top Thrill and things. But for now, Maverick's number 1. And after that gigantic side train story, I think we got to get back to the coaster building that we're making here for, gosh, I can't even get my words straight. I'm so excited about talking about that story. But this coaster station. And since we made a knockoff Maverick ride, I had to make a knockoff Maverick train station. And it's not exactly the same feel, but the color scheme is very similar, which is that it's this old, not rusted, but the paint is kind of peeling off, and the wood has definitely been aged. Mine shaft looking building. It has multiple levels, Since the coaster starts up, I think at like 6 meters, it takes a long time and walking up multiple like flights of stairs to get up to the top of the coaster park. And then, much like I did with the station that was supposed to look like a train station or Western train station, I really liked the open top design to the top of these buildings, and I think that it adds like a bit of uniqueness and something that if you were in this park in real life, walking down Main Street, you can see it. I forget what the name of that is. Next episode, I promise, I will have the name of that concept. Oh, gosh. Names seem to always evade me, but eventually, once I talk about this topic for long enough, it'll just be on the tip of my tongue, and I'll just be able to, roll with it. But I really like how the station turned out. But I think since this station's about to be figured out or finished up, we should go to a real-time part. Well, as you can see, although it took a while, we did finally hit the 500 guests in the park number. So there we go. And as a thank you for sticking with us throughout this whole episode, I wanted to give a quick little tour of where the park stands. And since the last little time-lapse section, I actually added in a few more buildings. So I added this right over here with this Q station. There's our wooden coaster that we made. The Main Street in all of its glory. Our little train station-ish, Western train station that we built for the junior coaster. A couple more Main Street buildings. I actually tacked on a few buildings on this side to finish off this section here. We have our additional queue for our other flat ride that we snuck in right behind the drop down of our Maverick knockoff coaster. The two little queues that we saw before, and then I also snuck in, and I couldn't finish the episode without showing it off, a transfer track for the Maverick coaster station. So I want to show off that as well. And I really like the overall look and feel of the park. So without further ado, thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. If you would leave a like and a comment on what you want to see for the next episodes going further, and other series that you'd like to see me work on. But until next time, see you everybody. Take care.